Well, who's enabling your habit there?
Of what the
Habit.
Oh, the habit of the
March back to call.
You're convincing me, but I actually wasn't thinking of that. Okay. Today let's start on Yud Aleph Amud Beis Amar Mar. I guess it's about, what's that, 15 lines from the bottom? 5, 10, maybe 16 lines from the bottom. Amar Mar. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And in the course of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash.
Amen.
And we're learning for Shleima from my father, for Naftali ben Benuta Bela. Okay, so it starts like this. Amar Mar. Remember, Amar Mar is going to analyze Brisa or a Mishnah that we quoted before in passing. What we said before was that a paraduma could be redeemed at any occasion. It could be even if it dies, it could be redeemed. If it's shechted, it could be redeemed. If you find a better one, it could be redeemed. And this was all part of a question that they were asking on Rabbah. He said that Leiv Bezdin Masna Alehem, that the court puts in an automatic stipulation that if we need this sacrifice, then if we need the sacrifice, then it's going to be a sacrifice. If we don't need it, then it's not going to be a sacrifice, and it's not consecrated. That way we could switch the consecration because there was this condition that the Bezdin was putting in. The problem was we had a question. I said, but we don't say that when it gets lost. It gets lost, we say you have to let it get a mum and die. And so he said, yeah, that's because that's uncommon. So we said, what about the paraduma is uncommon? So no, the paraduma is expensive. So the paraduma, it seems like you can switch things because Leiv Bezdin Masalim, but we explained because it was expensive. So they put in a stipulation special. Now, to go back to analyze that, we say, Amar Mar, Mesa Tifta, if it dies, then you could redeem it. It says, this is the paraduma. What do you do with the dead animal? What do you redeem it for? Usually the other animals, you redeem it and you shecht and you eat the meat. And it's regular, mundane meat. And then the money would go to whatever, to purchase a new sacrifice. But here, you just have a dead animal and you redeem it. So what are you going to do? You're going to feed it to the dogs? Is that the big thing that we're doing here? We redeem animals to feed them to dogs. Misharshi says, no, we're concerned about the skin of the paraduma. It's special red leather seats, belts, shoes. The Gemara says, "V'kaimi bezdin umasno adai tedaira," and now you want to tell me that the bezdin makes a stipulation that the sacrifice should not be considered a real sacrifice if it's not necessary, so that we should be able to get red leather seats. So, Amarav Kana, just for the skin, Amarav Kana, Amriinchi, people say migamla una, even from a camel you even take the ear. That means a special animal. Every part of it is precious, and even the ear, which is probably a small piece of skin, is precious. So here also, the paraduma, the animal itself is precious, then the skin is, we're going to care about every detail. Esvei. Gemara goes back to ask a question on Rabbi. Usually Esvei is very obvious who's asking the question. There's a difference between Mesvei, Esvei, and Masiv. Is who's asking the question. Esvei is always, you know who's asking it, and you know who's being asked on. Well, we know what's being asked on, we know it's being asked on Rabbah. But who's asking the question? I'm not sure. Do they put in their notes who's asking? That's not typical. Mesvei is they asked. Esvei is he asked. So, okay. Yeah, but then I don't know who they are. That would be Mesvei. Yeah, but when it says the word Esvei, it usually has Esvei Abaya L'Rav. Abaya asked Rav a question. It tells me who's asking and who's being asked. He uses a different term when it's the rabbi's house. It doesn't have that term. And then it would have used a different term. I have no clue what the English says. I wasn't analyzing the English. Okay. They asked the question on Rabbah. Amrullah, the Reb Shimon said to Reb Shimon, Mao sheyikruvu zebazeh. Going back on the Mishnah, he said, Reb Shimon introduced that the sacrifices that are brought, the Yom Kippur sacrifice, the Rosh Chodesh sacrifice, the holiday sacrifice, all of those were goats, right? Remember the goats? Shimon introduced that each one is brought for a different reason, and so they asked him, "What happens if one of them wasn't brought on the holiday? Can you bring it on the next holiday? Can you bring it on Rosh Chodesh?" He said, "Yeah." So, Shimon said that the one for Rosh Chodesh was an atonement for someone that ate meat that was impure. The holiday goat was brought for when there was no awareness at the beginning or at the end. Yom Kippur was when there was no awareness at the beginning, but there was awareness at the end. Right. So each one was different. They asked them, so what happens if one of them wasn't brought because you found that you lost it and you found another one? What can you do? Can you bring this one on the next holiday? He says, yeah, no problem. But they asked him back, but the kapara is not the same. How do you bring? It was designated for the wrong atonement, and now you're bringing it on this holiday. And he responded, well, it all has to do with impurity of the holies. So that's good. Like the very general umbrella covers it. So can you bring one of these goats on a different holiday, a different Rosh Chodesh? Said, yeah, that's no problem. They said to him, but they don't have the same atonement. They were designated for different purposes. Said, don't worry about that. There's a general umbrella that has to do with impurity and the holies, eating, entering. It's all the same general concept. Okay, now, why does he have to say that? According to Rabbah, you have a much better teretz. Leiv bezdin masnaleim. The bezdin, the intention of the bezdin was all conditional. When this was designated, it was conditional. I don't need to have it put it all under a general umbrella. I can just say it was a condition that was put in when this was designated, that if it's necessary, then it will be brought as this. If it's not necessary, we can bring it for something else. It wasn't consecrated specifically. That's a much better teretz. Why does Reb Shimon have to say it goes under the general umbrella? Reb Shimon Kamrat, the Gemara says, you're asking about Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Leslie, Leiv Bezin Masalim. Reb Shimon doesn't hold of Leiv Bezin Masalim. We had that before. That's not the opinion of Reb Shimon. So you're asking a kasha on Rabbah based on the opinion of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon doesn't even hold of that. Rabbah wasn't explaining Reb Shimon. When he said Leiv Bezin, he was explaining the Rabban. The Amar of Idi Baravan Amar of Amar Amar Rabbi Yechanan Tmidim if the daily offering wasn't necessary, according to Reb Shimon, it can't be redeemed if it doesn't have a blemish. Because Reb Shimon holds that we don't say Leiv Bezin Masalim. We don't say that the consecration was conditional. But according to the words of the sages, Niftim Tmimim, it could be redeemed, even though it doesn't have a blemish, based on Leiv Bezin Masalim, that the consecration was conditional. Now the Gemara says, Rabbanan de Pligila de Reb Shimon Manina. Where did you get these Rabbanan from? You just told me, oh, the rabbis hold differently. Which rabbis were you referring to? Do you have a source that there's rabbis that don't hold of Reb Shimon, that hold Leiv Bezin Masalim? So Inay Rabbanan de Ketairas. Let's go back. We said that the Ketairas, the remaining Ketairas that was brought for Yom Kippur was always some left over. And what did you do with it? You were able to pay the workers that mix the spices, and then buy it back from them and redeem it. And problem is, how are you deconsecrating it? So the answer to that was because Leiv Bezin Masalim, the Bezdin only consecrated it conditionally, right? So the Rabbanan obviously hold that you can do this. Which Rabbanan? The Rabbanan of the Ketores. Where it says Shani Ketores, La Baria. Maybe they made a condition by the Ketores, because what are you supposed to do for the Ketores? Wait till it gets a mum? Ketores doesn't get a mum. An animal you can put in the pan and let it get a mum. It gets a blemish. Well, how does it get a blemish? Well, while it's eating, it scratches itself on the fence or something, on a rock, on a nail. It gets a scratch on the lip.
Barbed wire.
They put barbed wire, right? So whatever the case was, it got a scratch. So the fact that the Bezdin is masna makes a condition by the Ketores, that's because you don't have an option. But by a carbon, you have an option. Wait till it gets a mum. So you have no proof that the Rabbanan of Ketores would hold that leave Bezdin masna aleim by an actual sacrifice. El Rabbanan the para must be the Rabbanan of the para aduma. Para aduma, we said that you can redeem it at any stage. The Gemara says, "Dilmashani para the meyikarim." Maybe that was different. Maybe that's because you know how you buy insurance only on the tickets that are very expensive. You know, the airline ticket. Maybe they leave best in masna lamb because the para aduma was very expensive. The regular sacrifice, a regular lamb, a goat, they don't buy insurance on that. It's not talking about insurance here. It's talking about they don't make the stipulation. They don't make the consecration conditional that if I need it, then good, and if not, then I'm gonna. They don't go through that because it's not so expensive. Ella Rabbanan da Amrulai, the Rabbanan from this conversation that they have with Reb Shimon. What do you do if you don't bring the sacrifice on Yom Kippur? Can you bring it also on the holiday? Can you bring it all also on Rosh Chodesh? And Reb Shimon said yes. And they said, why are you saying yes? It has a different atonement. So he said, Reb Shimon responded, he said it goes under the same umbrella. So it goes like this. Which means that the rabbis that were asking on Reb Shimon, they were saying that according to us, we hold leiv bezin masnale, and we don't have any questions on this because we hold that it's all conditional. But according to you, that you hold that it's not conditional, what are you going to do if you lose the sacrifice and then you find it? Can you bring it on one of the other holidays? When on that holiday it's going to be brought differently. You don't hold that the stipulate that the consecration was conditional. So he says, yeah, you can, because it goes under the general umbrella of impurity in the holies. We see from their question that according to us, we don't have a problem because we hold leiv bezin masna. We found the rabbis that hold leiv bezin, but according to you, that you don't hold of leiv bezin masna. What are you going to say? He said general umbrella. Okay, that's the Gemara's attempt of proving who the rabbis are that say leiv bezin masna. It's the ones that had this conversation with Reb Shimon. The conversation was Bishleim, according to us. Bishleim means it's good. According to us, we have our answer. But according to you, what are you going to say? Yeah. Right. Mara asks, how do you know that that was the conversation? How do you know? You see, we're jumping back into a slightly different topic here. There was a machlekes about what the sacrifices, the goat sacrifices, were used for. Reb Meir said they were all the same. Reb Yehuda said they were different. Reb Shimon says they're different. Plus, ain't lev bezin masna. So if it's Reb Yehuda that's asking Reb Shimon, then the conversation would go like this. I also hold that the sacrifices, the goats that are brought on Yom Kippur and brought on Rosh Chodesh, the ones that on the holidays, they're all different. I also hold that. But I hold leiv bezin masna lamb. So bishleim, according to me, if it's not brought on its designated time, so you could bring it at a different time. Why? Because the whole consecration was conditional. But according to you, that you hold that it wasn't conditional. So what are you going to say? And Reb Shimon answered that it went under the general umbrella. But if it's Reb Meir that's talking to Reb Shimon, it says Amrulai, they said to him, So who's the they said that? Who's the they that said? If it's Reb Meir that was talking to him, so Reb Meir's conversation would go a little different. Reb Meir's conversation would be, Bishlam, according to me, that all of the sacrifices are brought for the same purpose to make the sukkah if someone entered the temple when he's impure. But according to you, that you say that one of them is for entering the temple impure. One of them is if you ate the sacrifice that's impure, the sacrifice, and one of them is for when you didn't have any awareness before or after. So each one was different. So what are you going to say? So it's not a conversation about Leiv Bes and Masalem. It's about if they're brought for the same atonement. It's a different conversation. The Gemara says, "B'mayda Rabbi Yehudi." How do you know that the conversation is a conversation between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon regarding Leiv Bes and Masalem? I'm like 3 lines from the top on 12a. How do you know that it's Rabbi Yehuda discussing with Reb Shimon? And this would be the conversation. It works out well according to me. Damina, that I say Leiv Bes and Masalem, I say that the Bezdin has a stipulation whenever they consecrate something that if it's not necessary, it's not going to be consecrated. Amtulahachi, that means therefore, Yikru, that's why you're allowed to bring it on another holiday. But according to you, you say that the Bezdin does not stipulate anything and they just consecrate it directly. Why? How are you allowed to bring it on another holiday? How do you know that was the conversation? Dilma Reb Meir, maybe the conversation was a Reb Meir and Reb Shimon conversation. Vachi Karmelei, and this would be what they're speaking about. According to me, Damina Kol Asirim Kaparas and Shava, all the goats have the same atonement. Mishum Hachi, switch to Mishum Hachi instead of Amtala Hachi, same thing. Yikru, that's why you're allowed to bring it. But according to you, Ama Yikru, how are you allowed to bring it? Each comes for a different atonement. Okay, so how do we know? We did not find yet who the Chachamim are that say Leiv Bes and Masna there. Elo Rabbi Yechanan Gemara Gamela. Rather, Rabbi Yechanan, he had a tradition that L'div Reb Shimon ein niftin, L'div Chacham niftin. He had a tradition that Reb Shimon holds that you have to redeem a sacrifice because it's not according to Reb Shimon, you can't redeem it unless it has a mum. And according to the Chacham, you can redeem it because there was a stipulation that was placed there. In other words, we don't have an actual Mishnah that supports this words of Rabbi Yechanan. We're just accepting that Rabbi Yechanan has this from tradition. Yeah. Sometimes we have things like this. People say, where did the rabbis get that from? Well, the rabbis got it from the rabbis before them. The wall. Okay. Now, Gemara says, the Reb Shimon de Leslie Leiv Bes and Masnale and my Abnalahu. If I have a sacrifice that belonged to the community, and so, for example, the daily sacrifices, the Tmidim, that was, they always had 6 in the room, 6 daily sacrifices that were there that were ready to be offered, because they needed to watch them for 4 days. So what they would do is they would take 6 of them, put them into a room, and then over the next 4 days they could use them. So the first day they would take 2. They were always adding another 2. So there was always, and I guess they knew which one was from the previous day, so they would take those. At the end of the year, they had 6 sacrifices in the room. They take the last day of the year, they take 2 of them. There's 4 left over. Those 4, what do you do with them? Because the following year, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you have to bring the sacrifices from the new shkalim. What are you going to do with those extra 4? So the Gemara asks, according to the Chachamim hold that they were only consecrated because it was a stipulation, right? It was conditional. So now that they're not necessary for this year, so we'll just redeem them and purchase them again for with the new year's shkalim, which is perfect. But according to Reb Shimon, that says that we don't say Leiv Bes and Masna Aleim, what are you going to do with these extra sacrifices? Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak, yeah, there's 4 extra sacrifices every year. Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yechanan, mekitzim behen es mizbeach. Mekitzim is like a dessert or a surplus. They use it to keep the altar busy on slow days when there's not a lot of sacrifices. They bring an extra sacrifice just to keep the altar busy. It's a dessert.
We get the army surplus stores.
Yeah. So what does it have to do with the dessert? I think kayetz is the figs that they would eat for dessert. Yeah. Does it explain the word? Okay. Amar Reb Shmuel, I think later on the Gemara is going to explain. Amar Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak. So in other words, what Reb Shimon is, what we're answering according to Reb Shimon is we're just going to use it as sacrifices without any, but not as the carbon tamid. Carbon tamid needed to be brought with the new money that was donated specifically for this year. This is just extra stuff that's getting burnt on the altar, just to keep the altar full. Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Reb Shimon b'siri chata shem mekitzim begufen ela b'demeim. Shmuel bar Yitzchak says that Reb Shimon introduced that he used sacrifices, extra sacrifices, just to keep the altar full. Says, well, it's not so simple. That's only if it's an oila. That's only if it would be a carbon tamid. But let's say you had an extra chatas. How would you have an extra chatas? If you lose the goat and of Rosh Chodesh Adar, and then you say, oh, well, you lose the goat, so you bring. Don't worry about it, guys. I have more in the thing. You bring another goat, and then you find that goat. So now I have a goat that was designated. What are you going to do with it? For Rosh Chodesh Nisan, you can't bring it anymore. What are you going to do with it? He says, you can't bring it as an extra offering on Rosh Chodesh Nisan or any time after that, just as to keep the altar busy. Because to keep the altar busy, that was only a carbon oila, which is an elevation offering, a burnt offering. But this was a carbon chatas. You can't bring just a random carbon chatas. So what do? You have to redeem it. And then when you redeem it, then you buy another animal that you'll use as an oila that will just keep the altar busy. So you don't use the actual chatas, you have to redeem it, and then with the value you purchase a new one. So the Gemara says, over here, when it came to the carbon tamid, which is the daily sacrifice, originally it was a carbon oila, and now we bring it as an oila. But over there, the mikara chatas originally was a sin offering. And now it's going to be an oila. Maybe someone's going to switch a carbon chatas even before the atonement was brought. See, if someone was supposed to bring a carbon chatas and he loses it, so that new carbon, so he brings another carbon. So the old one that he finds turns into an oila. Let's say he would do that. Then maybe he's going to end up bringing the oila before he actually brings the chatas. And there's a problem with that. You're supposed to always bring the chatas first before the oila. You don't give the gift until after you've paid up your dues. Yeah. So the chatas has to be brought first. So therefore, we don't want to allow you to bring this carbon, this animal directly as an oila. Amar Abaya says, Afana namitanina. This difference between an oila and a chatas, that an oila could be brought directly as a carbon oila, even though it wasn't originally the same oila that you're bringing it now. Now you're bringing it as a dessert for the mizbeach. Before it was a tamid or whatever, but a chatas would be different. So we have a mishnah that supports this, or a brisa. Tanina is usually a mishnah. If you have the goat or the bull of Yom Kippur that were lost, and you designated other ones. These were both brought. The par was brought for impurity to the holiest that the kohanim did. The goat was brought for impurities to the holiest that a regular person did. But they're both brought for that. They're both sin offerings.
They don't.
Just in case. Oh, who had it get lost? Who lost them? Yeah. Oops. Yeah. It's possible that lost means that it got mixed in and you don't know which one it is. And then someone says, oh, no, I remember it had a spot had a birthmark under its belly. So, the same would be a goat for a goat that was brought as an atonement for Avodah Zarah, that the community had mistakenly served Avodah Zarah, thinking that it was permissible because of the ruling of the court. And they designated another one, kulam yamusu. All of them are put to death. All of those sacrifices, you can't do anything with them. They just die, and that's it. Rabbi Yehuda, that's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. The chatas doesn't really have much to do with that. If it wasn't brought the way it was originally intended, so you just let it die. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Aimrim, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon said, Yirach Yistavu. Rabbi Lazar ben Shimon, Rabbi Shimon, they hold that you let it get a mum, and then after it gets a mum, a blemish, be machru, then you can sell it. And then the money goes to the fund to the donation, which from that donation you bring other sacrifices, oila sacrifices. So you switch it from a chatas to an oila, and then you bring Jane chatas sibur mesa, because the community chatas doesn't get put to death. If it's an individual chatas, then if the owner dies or if it's not necessary anymore because he brought a different one, so it gets put to death. But a community chatas doesn't get put to death. Now, why don't why do we say that it has to get a mum? Why don't we just bring the animal itself as an ayla? No, because the rule is that the chatas doesn't get brought as an ayla because of a decree that you may end up bringing the chatas before the ayla before you actually brought the chatas, which doesn't make sense. So we have to wait till you bring another chatas, then you redeem this chatas, and then you bring it as a ayla. Amar Rava Afanana Rava says we also have another source for this. This is if I have the two goats for Yom Kippur. One of them is going to be sent off as Azazel, pushed off the mountain, the cliff. Another one is going to be brought as a sacrifice the blood is going to be sprinkled in the sanctuary. Let's say one of those animals dies, the one that was being sent away. So because they were designated as a pair, so I can't just bring one other sacrifice. I have to bring two more sacrifices. Now I'm left with three. So when I'm left with three, so one of them is going to be brought, one of them is sent to Azazel, one of them is going to be brought as sacrifice. Vasheni, what do you do with the other one? It's really Vashlishi, right? The second one that was for Hashem, that was the karban, because now I have two that are the karban. So Yira, you let it graze, ad shistav, until it gets a mum. Yimacher, you sell it, Yifaldamul and Dava. Vamai, why do you have to do that? Yikrav you gufei, just bring it as a sacrifice, as a oila. Like we said, Ketam Mizbeach. When the altar is off it's off time. There's not a lot going on. You just bring it up as a sacrifice to keep the altar busy. No, we always have this decree that the chatas cannot be brought directly as oila because you may end up bringing it as an oila before you actually brought the chatas itself. Okay, Amar Ravina, before the atonement was done. Amar Ravina says, I have another source for this. This is our third source. Let's say there's a guilt offering. Now there's six types of guilt offering that are brought. So either the owner died, now it doesn't need to be brought, or the owner had already brought another sacrifice and they had an extra one here because maybe it got lost, so they designated another one and they brought the other one, now they found the first one. So you wait till it gets a mum. And then you sell it, and then you let it go as those donation offerings, which are brought as the surplus offerings that are brought when the off time in the temple. Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, the first opinion was you wait till it gets a mum. Rabbi Eliezer says you let it die. Now, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that a chatas and asham are comparable in many areas, including this one here. That if it's not necessary because it was already brought, the atonement was already brought, the same thing applies to the asham, that it gets put to death. Rabbi Yeshua Aimer Yavi B'dam Avayla. Yeshua says that you redeem it, and it's brought as an Ayla. The Chacham said he brought as an Ayla also. The Chacham were referring to that he brought it as an Ayla for the community. This is, you bring it as an Ayla for an individual. Someone else can buy it. That's how it's redeemed. Oh, you need to bring an Ayla? We have an Ayla for sale over here. You take this one. Just pay the price. Gemara says, why do you have to bring the value of it? You redeem it, you pay for it, and you bring another Ayla. Just bring it as an Ayla. Because it's an atonement. We're afraid that if you're going to bring it as an Ayla, maybe you're going to bring it as an Ayla before the atonement was really brought. And that doesn't make sense to bring the gift offering before the obligation offering. Shema Minar. Tanya Nami Hachi. It's also taught in a Brisa that we bring the extra offering to keep the altar full. Mahim Ivim and Maseches. What do you bring with the extra sacrifices? The ones that are left over from year to year. Kates. It's like a dessert of white figs for the altar.
You ever had a white fig?
No.
For Kate's? Delicious.
Usually the figs are brown or purple.
Oh yeah, coated with GMO yeah, or coated with white chocolate.
Yes, he says it's coated with white chocolate. So okay. But the pasuk says he calls Shavachol you don't bring any fruits on the altar. What are you telling me? It's like white figs for the altar. It says Tani Reb Chanina, no, it's not white figs for the altar. It's white figs for the people. It's brought on the altar like people eat dessert. Not like the altar eats dessert. Yeah, we just used the wrong term over here. It's brought as a dessert. Just like people eat dessert at the end of a meal. Not like the altar eats dessert. The altar doesn't eat the figs. But it's brought, and this animal is comparable to what people would have as dessert. Okay.
I have a white fig tree in my front yard. This is not calling it out.
It doesn't give white figs, does it?
Nope.
The tree is white.
Oh. You have an olive tree. It's not give olive. Forget it.
They call it Adriatic figs.
Adriatic? Interesting.
Whole discussion. Go on Amazon Fresh, order them up.
They're like, they call it white pale. They're more like greenish, but Adriatic.
So you've seen them?
Of course, he has. He grew up in Israel.
No. Just looked it up.
So interesting. Remember that Gemara Tamid about they used a fig wood for to burn. So how were they able to get fit? They used the fruit tree. You can't use it. It says no, they made it that it didn't grow fruit because they rubbed the seed and they.
Oh, everyone's up.
Everyone's getting up to get the encyclopedias. Okay. Darash of Nachman bar Rav Chisda. Nachman bar Rav Chisda taught. Ein mekitzin ba'ilas ha'oif. When the altar is empty and you want to keep it full, so you want to bring extra stuff, but you don't bring you don't bring any bird offerings. You don't bring the elevation offering of the bird. That's what Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda taught. Amar Rava says, Burcha, says that's nonsense. That's Burcha is like Baba Mises. You concocted that on your own. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Rava. Rav Nachman says to Rava, my Burcha, what are you telling me? This is concocted on my own. Anna, oh wow. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda was the one that said it. Rava says that's ridiculous. Rav Nachman bar Rav Yitzchak says to Rava, why are you telling him that that's ridiculous? I know I'm Risanale. I'm the one that taught it to him. He is in trouble. And I even said it in the name of Rav Simon Ardai. Rav Simon Ardai, extra sacrifices go to the donation offering of the community. But you never bring a public so it has to be a community offering, and there's no community offering. That's a bird. Is that true? There's no community offering. That's a bird. We don't bring any birds on the holidays. We don't bring the birds on a typical day. So there's no community bird offerings. Yes. What was that?
Withheld a Thanksgiving joke.
Oh. Okay, Yitzi didn't tell us the Thanksgiving joke that he wanted to say. Okay. But what's interesting is, I was learning this last night with my brother Yuri. So he pointed out over here that what about according to Rabbi Yeshua? What about according to Rabbi Yeshua that says Yavi bedam of Oila, that you could bring a private offering with an extra. That was by the Asham now. Here we're talking about the extra Tamidim. Okay. He just pointed out that there was a possibility of using an extra sacrifice as a private offering. And if it would be a private offering, then that maybe could be brought as a, here we're talking about as a community offering, just keep the altar full, so then we won't bring a bird. And Shmuel also holds what Rabbi Yechanan says, that what did Rabbi Yechanan say? That you use, Rabbi Yechanan said that you use it to Keitza Mizbeach, right? It was Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, back on the page before. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Mekitzim Be'emes Mizbeach. So now we say that Shmuel also holds a Rabbi Yechanan. Shmuel and Rabbi Yechanan are the same generation. Shmuel is in Bavel. Dam Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda is a student of Shmuel. He taught Kabbanis Tzibur, community sacrifices. Sakin, the knife, Meshchasan L'Mashehem, draws it into the sacrifice that it's going to be. In other words, even though it's consecrated as a sacrifice, but it's not fully consecrated as a designated sacrifice until the knife comes and shechts it, because it could be sacrificed, it could be sanctified as a carbon tamid, and it ends up being bought as a carbon oilaf as a gift, because it doesn't have that finished designation until the knife comes and shechts it. Tani Nami Achi, also taught in the Brayso, Meider Reb Shimon, Reb Shimon agrees by a goat. If it wasn't brought on the holiday, that sin offering of the holidays, right? It's brought on Rosh Chodesh. If it wasn't brought on Rosh Chodesh, you can bring it on Yom Kippur. If it wasn't brought on Yom Kippur, you bring it on a holiday. If it wasn't brought on the holiday, you bring it on another holiday. Because originally it was only consecrated as an atonement on the outer altar. So since it has a general consecration. So even though specifically it wasn't done yet, specific which holiday, which is it Rosh Chodesh, or is it Yom Kippur, is it one of the other holidays? That doesn't matter. That the knife is going to take care of. Tana was started in the general consecration was there, that it's an atonement for the outer altar. That's atonement on the outer altar for any impurities that takes place in there. Okay. There was the Karban Musaf of Yom Kippur. That was the goat that was brought outside. And then there was the one that was brought inside, which was part of the pier. Who is talking here? This is Amrullah. This is the sages talking. Zading to Masmikdash Dashav. Sir Anas Bifnim Yom Kippur Mechafim. Ashara Vesh Betera Kals Vachmer Sadin Shaskagis Haida Haida. Okay. Do you have, as this is being quoted, are they quoting this in the name of the sages or in the name of Reb Shimon? Okay, yeah, I think it's the sages. They held that if an intentional sin of impurity in the holies, so the goat that's brought inside, that atones for that. How do we know this? And it will be an atonement of the holies from the impurities of the Jewish people. I think it says, from their intentional sins, rebellious sins. The intentional sins are the rebellious sins, which means he knows about it. He did it on purpose. He entered in, even though he knew that he was impure. It also says that the king of Mayav rebelled. So we're translating the word pesha to mean rebel. It also says, Tifsha Livna. They say Livna will rebel at that time. What does it mean? A sin offering? Elo Ashkagas, those are the unintentional sins. There's a whole discussion in Masechtas Yoma, if you remember what each one was. As it says, the soul that will sin unintentionally. So he uses the word chait for shaygig. And the other sins of any other aver in the Torah, whether it's a light sin, severe sin, intentional or unintentional, and it goes on to list positive, negative, this punishment, this capital punishment, that one. I know kalas, I know asay. When you say a light command, a light violation, that's referring to a neglect of a positive or a violation of a negative. We're just talking, it's not capital or it's not karas. Kamuras, what would be a severe one? I know krisis Mrs. Bezdin. Haida, if he knows about it, I know mezid, that means it's intentional. Loyhaida, if he doesn't know about it, no awareness, I know shaken, that means unintentional. So why are we repeating this by just giving like this whole list of whether it's this or whether it's that, and we're really repeating ourselves? Amrav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda, it says, he explains Hachi Kamar, what it means to say is the following. Al Shara Veir Shabbatera, when it comes to any other sin, Bein Kalis, Bein Chamuris, whether it's light, whether it's severe, Bein Shasim B'Shoigeg, Bein Shasim Mez, whether it was done unintentionally, whether it was done intentionally. Oisan Shasim B'Shoigeg, those that were done unintentional, Bein Neidele Sveiken, Bein Neidele Sveiken, whether he is aware that he did it or whether he's not aware that he did it. Be'iloin Kalis, and the following are the light sins. It's a positive, neglect of a positive, or a violation of a negative. Be'iloin Chamuras, and the severe ones are krisis mistabezin. So in other words, what Rabbi Yehuda is doing is explaining that we gave the general things at the beginning, and now we elaborate what are those general things that we said. Well, this contains this sin, and this contains that sin, and so it spells it out. To define, we put like a hyphen between this hyphen and then it would be the following that's contained in that, right? Okay, let's leave it right over here by Hayasei. See that? Hayasei Hechidami. 5 lines from the bottom. This positive command, we'll stop right there.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, Colton.
Yeah, all the best.